With the football season just mere weeks away, it is finally time to make some predictions. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, as always, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. Running solo again, Nick will be on for the rest of the season. I promise. Nick will be on next week, and then we go to 2 episodes a week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. A lot of exciting announcements coming in the next week. Next week, we've got a lot of announcements. The schedule that we're going to be releasing for the channel, it's a doozy. A lot of work for us, but we're excited to do it. So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be a video. Next week is the last week we are doing 1 episode a week. So as you see in the title and thumbnail, this week, we're doing Depth Chart Predictions. I'll give you guys, we'll get into it in a little bit, but I'm going to be giving you guys what I'm hearing, how I foresee the week 1 depth chart kind of taking place. Next week on Friday, we'll be releasing our final season predictions. Obviously, if you are a fan of the channel, we released our way too early scheduled predictions when the schedule got released, but we're officially going to make our set-in-stone predictions for the season next Friday. But probably around next Wednesday, I'm going to be debuting a new video on Wednesday, kind of showing you guys the schedule and what it's going to look like for the rest of the season, some new announcements and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that. Also, I know I'm releasing this at 5, so if you are watching it right away, then I'm going to be on In the Zone today from 3 to 6, so you have 1 more hour to listen to me on In the Zone today with Tyler Karen. Brandon Kravitz is out. I filled in for him, so go check that out. But really good opportunity for, again, the show, the channel, to be able to get on 96.9 The Game and talk UCF football and other stuff. So be sure to check me out there all season long for UCF. But let's get into it. We are just, I don't do math very well, 13 days? 13 days away, I think is the right math right now. 13 days away from finally kicking off the season. We're all so pumped. We're all ready to go. At this point, listen, there's been so much talk over the last, not even just month, but the last 6 months, right? That I think we're all just ready to kick it off and see what happens. Now, as you know, the first 2 weeks, it's going to be, people are going to be primed and ready for UCF to be in the college football playoff for the first 2 weeks. Unless something goes horribly wrong, because you got New Hampshire and Sam Houston. But, you know, I've been at practice, and let me be specific. We've only been able to go to a couple practices and see actual practice. Most of the time, the practices are closed. We go into the media room, we ask questions. But I've been at most of the media availability for the fall camp. Tomorrow is the 3rd and I think final, I'm pretty sure final, scrimmage of fall camp. And they're going to start prepping next week for New Hampshire. So they're going to get about 2 weeks of prep in for game number 1. And that's when you're really going to start seeing some firm decisions on the depth chart. We're really not going to know the depth chart up until the first week. But I figured on Charge On, we can go through. And most of these, I will say, I think at this point are very well known. Or you can safely assume. But I wanted to go through them just so we can have a better idea of where we're at right now. All right, so let's start with the offense. We're going to go through the offense. Quarterback, obviously KJ Jefferson. He's going to be the starter going in. Ja'Cory Brown is, in my opinion, Ja'Cory Brown is going to be the backup. I think he's done an incredible job in camp from everything that we're hearing, which all credit goes to him, given coming in over the summer, having to learn new installs. It's interesting given how much of a start Dylan Risk had. He was here all last year, but it seems like if, KJ were to go down, Jakari Brown would be the guy. And then for most of these, I will say, it's really I'm only listing the starters and sometimes the backups to those starters. We're not going into third, fourth team, stuff like that. But for quarterback, I did put a QB3. Now, I do not have any inside information on this. I'm just going to spit out what I saw at one practice. EJ Colson, I think, might be QB3 heading into this season. I might be wrong on that. At one of the practices in our 20 to 30 minute time to be able to watch practice, EJ Colson took the QB3 reps. So, and that is with me. Again, it could be a lot of different things. It could be maybe Dylan was a little banged up. Who knows? But as of right now, that's the only thing I saw. So I'm expecting to see EJ Colson at QB3. Not like we're going to see him, not like we were going to see him or Dylan anyway this year, but it's definitely something that I took note of and would be really good if a 17-year-old that's supposed to be a senior in high school is QB3 already. So just thought I would throw that out there for your guys's, for you guys to have that information. Let's go to running backs. Again, with most of these, like I said, depth chart predictions, it's not really too much of a prediction when you have guys like Kobe or with RJ Harvey and Penny Boone. RJ Harvey, I list them as 1A and 1B. RJ Harvey's going to get a majority of the carries, but I have heard that Penny Boone, and should be no shock given how big Penny Boone is, but Penny Boone is getting a lot of the goal line opportunities. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be just 100% Penny Boone in the end zone, but I think it's going to be probably 75 to 25% split depending on where they are on the field. Penny Boone is just a ground and pound. He's got speed, but he goes forward. He pushes the ball forward. So I think in a Gus Malzahn offense, if they're on the 4-yard line, do not be shocked if you see both RJ Harvey and Penny Boone in there, and you just don't know who in the Wildcat is getting the ball. If RJ will give it off to Penny, if RJ will keep it himself, if Penny is in the Wildcat. So we'll find all that out, but I think that's 1A and 1B with obviously RJ Harvey being easily 1A. Running back, technically 3, but 2 if you want to, because I said 1A and 1B for Penny Boone. Miles Montgomery. Tim Harris said it in the press conference this past week that so far, if they had to pick an MVP of the offense, it would be Miles Montgomery, just because of how hard he works, the plays that he's made, obviously transfers from Cincinnati. So I think if you're looking at a guy that's right behind those two guys, I'd say Miles Montgomery. Obviously, you have Johnny Richardson, and I'm intrigued to see how they use him. But I think one of the negatives of the UCF staff is how they've used Johnny Richardson in the past year or so, year and change. Johnny Richardson is a big-time play threat. He can really take plays to the house at any given moment. His speed is one of the best things about him. I just don't think the offense that we've run has really catered to Johnny's positives. So as of right now, I would assume that he's running back 4. And again, this is what I'm assuming. I have no inside information, but and Johnny could very well be 3 and Miles could very well be 4. But I would say from everything that we're hearing, I think Miles deserves that chance to be RB3. All right, wide receiver. Obviously, Kobe Hudson, Xavier Townsend. If I say obviously too much, it's probably because all of this stuff is very obvious. Kobe Hudson, Xavier Townsend, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Xavier Townsend, I think, is impressed in camp. From KJ has mentioned him a lot of the time. Gus Malzahn mentions Xavier Townsend. He's clearly had a really good camp. We haven't talked to Kobe, so we have no idea, but they said Kobe's increasingly gotten better over the course of camp. Wide receivers 3, we talked about it on one of the latest episodes of Charge On. Go check it out. But I said I think Chauncey Magwood is going to be the wide receiver 3 heading in. Now, I did put a caveat, and I said I think it's going to be a by committee approach. I don't think it's going to be like last year where you have the clear-cut 3 and Kobe, Javon, Xavier, and that's what you see on the field. You had those 3 wide receivers. I think this is going to be more of a, depending on the week, depending on the matchup, depending on who's got the hot hand, I think Chauncey Magwood, has the leg up right now, but then Jacoby Jones and Trent Whittemore are right behind them, or are all neck and neck. When we asked Tim Harris, he says all the receivers are about the same. Nobody's kind of separated themselves, so I would assume it's those guys right now. But again, you go back to spring, a guy like Burdell Richardson, who, incoming freshman who has really impressed. Maybe he gets some playing time. Jared Baker, who did really well in the spring game. Will he get some playing time? So they've got a lot of options there at the wide receiver position. It's just who's going to really make that leap and take that jump and take over that wide receiver 3 position. Tight end, Randy Pittman. He's clear-cut number 1. I think when you look at backup, Grant Stevens. I've heard he had a touchdown or 2. I can't remember. I think it was 1 touchdown in the latest scrimmage. He's, I think, clear-cut tight end number 2 right now. I think you could see a lot of 2 tight end sets in this offense sometimes, just depending on the situation. But those are the 2 guys right now that I would assume are separating themselves from the pack. Now, here's the thing with the offensive line. So I have my starting 5. From what we've heard, some guys that have mentioned their name. I'm going to mention the backups too, with what we're hearing, but I'm going to get into an offensive line little spiel here, right? I know this is the depth chart prediction. It was very apparent last year that there was a lot of issues on the offensive line. You could make the argument it was the biggest issue. You could make that argument. They couldn't find a center. They had to mix and match the offensive line practically every single game. Sometimes within the game, they'd have to mix and match. And you understand that, right? You understand players get injured, stuff happens. But hopefully this year, and the coaches have made emphasis on this point, being they are cross-training every single offensive lineman. Because Herb Hand said it. They don't want the situation to be, well, this guy plays left guard. Your 10th best offensive lineman just plays left guard. So your starting left guard goes down and you have to put your 10th best offensive lineman in the game. Their goal is to, if one guy goes down, you could put your 6th best offensive lineman in. If another guy goes down, you could put your 7th best offensive lineman in. So you don't have to take a certain position and move them into a slot that maybe they're not ready for. A guy that comes to mind is like Walt Claire Flynn, incoming freshman at center. Obviously, and I'll talk about the center position with Caden Kittler, but Caden Kittler, I have him projected to start. He's been said that, or Gus Malzahn and Herb Hand has said, and that Caden Kittler, it's his job to lose. Like, he technically didn't lose it last year. He got injured, and they had to mix and match, put Marcellus Marshall at center, Lakahi Paoli at center sometimes. So it's Caden Kittler's job to lose. If Caden Kittler were to go down, your backup right now is Jabari Brooks out of Samford. What if he's your 10th best offensive lineman, right? Then you don't want to have to put Jabari Brooks in. If you were just going by that logic, and Caden Kittler got hurt, Jabari Brooks got hurt, then you're putting in Walt Claire Flynn, who I'm not saying shouldn't play this year. I said he has a chance to compete in year 1. Now, I know he was dealing with some injury stuff this fall, I think, and so he's probably not getting a lot of reps, especially as a freshman. But the fact of the matter is the coaches are cross-training everybody so that they can put the best possible 5 into the game and not have to go down deep on the depth chart to grab players. So that's my spiel. I'm really happy the coaching staff is doing that, and hopefully no injuries will come from it. All right, starting at left tackle, Amari Kite. That's where I'm expecting him to go. He's clearly one of UCF's better offensive linemen. I think the tackle positions are going to be the question mark, in my opinion. Not necessarily Amari Kite. I think Amari Kite can hold his own. We'll talk about right tackle in a second. Adrian Medley at left guard. He really impressed last year. I think he can just take that next step up to really solidify that interior side. Caden Kittler at center, again, showed some good things, got injured. We got stuck with some really bad offensive linemen that luckily are no longer on the team, like Drake Metcalf. It was rough watching that. So hopefully Caden can stay healthy. And I asked Caden, like, does the offensive line have a chip on their shoulder? Because a lot of the negative conversation surrounding the team last year was around the offensive line. And again, rightfully so. And I think what I heard from Caden gave me a lot of confidence in terms of they've already forgot about last year's record. They put that so far out of their head, and we all have a chip on our shoulder. The entire team has a chip on our shoulder. That record is not good. We need to be better than that record. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I would implore you guys to go check it out on my Twitter page. But it gives me great confidence that Herb Hand in the offensive line is going to be significantly better than it was last year. And they need to be, given you're protecting KJ Jefferson, and KJ Jefferson needs to have time to do what he needs to do. Starting right guard, Marcellus Marshall. I see a lot of people saying he could start at the tackle position. He very well could be. I know there's some transfers that could, I think, be serviceable right guards. But with that being said, from everything I've heard from Paul Rubelt at right tackle or at the tackle position, I would feel more comfortable starting Paul Rubelt at right tackle and moving Marcellus to guard. So that's my five: Amari Kite, Adrian Medley, Caden Kittler, Marcellus Marshall, and Paul Rubelt. And I'm so happy if Paul Rubelt starts and he's getting playing time. What a story. Has been here for, I think, like 4 years and is finally getting a nod to get some playing time. And everybody's mentioned him. That's why I'm assuming he's starting, because everybody's mentioned how much better he's gotten and how much he's improved over the years. So we'll see if Paul Rubelt finally gets that nod. I'm going to put him there mostly because I want to see him start in that position. Now, if we look at some backups, we have Keegan Smith. Again, that's a guy that you could definitely see as a backup at guard, or he could have started at guard, depending on how he plays. Wes Dorsey got brought in at tackle. You have Cameron Kinney. He was here last year, who he had injury issues, but you could easily see him get playing time. Jabari Brooks, I mentioned him at center. That's another guy that got brought in. Keon Cox. So there's a lot of names that, we don't... This is the problem with... We spent the most time on offensive line. Imagine that. A lot of those guys, we looked at it last year and we were like, oh, it's going to be transfer-heavy offensive line. Do you actually want to do that? And you saw some of the repercussions to that. You saw a guy like Drake Metcalf, who you say, oh, he's coming from a program like Stanford. Like, he should be pretty good. And we realized, oh, no, he's not. He can't even snap a football. So it's a positive and a negative. I think right now the positive is right now your 5 starters were all here last year. So it's not the same quarterback, but you're working and you've played with each other and you've built up a chemistry to where, if you need to bring in a backup, okay, it's going to ruffle something. But as long as you're putting in your best 5 and not your number 10 or number 9, it should be good for UCF on that front. So those are the starters on offense. Defense becomes a little bit interesting because defense is going to be a lot of transfers. It's going to be a lot of transfers. Now, I have one on here that's a hot take that probably won't happen, but we'll see. So let's start with the obvious spot. Defensive tackle, nose tackle. Ricky Barber, Lee Hunter. Lee Hunter, there's a chance if Lee Hunter has the season that we all think he's going to have, and I don't think this is hyperbole. I don't think this is being a homer. If Lee Hunter has another monster season, he'll be a 1st to 3rd round pick in the NFL draft. I think he's that talented. He's put enough on tape to where NFL teams will want to draft Lee Hunter. Backup position at the defensive tackle, Matthew Alexander. I think Matthew Alexander and John Walker, both of them, because those are both your backups. I think they showed some good stuff last year. We talked about how the defensive line has been getting a lot of praise from the coaching staff and how they're getting a lot of pressure. And again, you expect that with a Ted Roof type defense and really trying to get to the quarterback. I want to see them get more pressure, specifically them two, because I think one of the negatives was not being able to get pressure on quarterbacks last year, not creating many negative plays. And I think getting Matthew Alexander and John Walker in there to really push the line and really get more pressure on the quarterback is going to be vital for this UCF defense. You can't just have Ricky and Lee doing it 24/7. You have to have the big guys that come in to, give them some rest. You have to have them make just as much push. So, and I will say, I was going to mention this on one of the radio shows, and I can't remember where I was going to mention it, but I was watching the defensive tackles at the last practice. It was earlier this week. I think it was on Monday. And I don't know which defensive tackle maybe wasn't doing enough. I don't think it was a guy that's, expected to play, but I think it was maybe a walk-on guy. I'm not entirely sure. But clearly Lee Hunter was not happy with the effort that this guy was giving. So Lee went at him and said, stop with that. Like, you got to go 100%. Like, don't go 50% in a rep. Like, you need to go 100%. And you just saw the leadership. He might not be vocal all the time, but he's vocal when he wants to be. So I'm expecting big things out of the defensive tackle and nose tackle positions. The buck position. This is the one where I think I'm going to maybe cause some interesting conversations. Many assume Nigel Kelly will be the starter there. And I'm not disagreeing with that. There's a good chance of that happening. You also have Dalen Dotson. I'm going to say Caven Call starts week 1. I've heard some things from some people. Caven Call was really impressive last year, and people were like, is he going to get playing time? He just needs to put on some weight. I've heard he needs to put on some weight. You could easily see Caven Call start week 1. If we're being realistic, Nigel Kelly will start. But I'm going to believe that Caven Call gets the start in week 1. All I am knowing is the fact that he's getting the good reps and he is impressing again shows me it's only a matter of time before he gets some playing time. Defensive ends, Malachi Lawrence, Jamal Johnson. Malachi Lawrence, it reminded me a lot of our first year doing this pod, where you had Isaiah Bowser, and we clearly saw that RJ Harvey was the better running back. Go watch our videos after games where we're basically pleading with the coaching staff to start RJ Harvey. We love Isaiah Bowser, but RJ Harvey's the better back. He's way more elusive. He can do way more with the football. Why isn't RJ Harvey starting? That was us last year with Malachi Lawrence. It's like we love Josh Seliskar. We love Josh Seliskar, but he's not performing. He's not performing well. Malachi Lawrence is coming in, playing 25% of the snaps, sometimes half the snaps, and he's doing way more with his opportunities. So I think he's going to have a monster year. I think this dude is ultra talented, and I'm excited to see Jamal Johnson. I'm excited to see Jamal Johnson get in there. Another guy that's been here for a couple years, just waiting on his opportunity, learning from the older guys like, Malachi now. Like, they're both getting their opportunities. And this isn't, again, I don't like to poo-poo on Josh Seliskar because I'm sure Jamal Johnson learned a lot from Josh, and Malachi Lawrence learned a lot from Josh and other guys before them. But I am excited to see those guys and what they can do on this defense this year. Linebackers, we talked a little bit about it in the last episode where I mentioned you can kind of assume who the starters were. That was all but confirmed this past week with Ted Roof, that Ethan Barr and Deshaun Pace are going to be your starting linebackers week 1. I don't think there's any question that those two guys are going to be it. He also did mention Josiah Pierre, Texas Tech transfer, so that is something to note. And then Andrew Harris. Those are the 4 guys that have been mentioned time and time and time again when it came to the linebacker room. So you could safely assume that those are going to be the guys that are constantly rotating. Now, there's other guys that you can say, hey, they're on the come up, but those 4 guys right now. But Andrew Harris, I'm excited about. I'm excited for Andrew Harris to finally get playing time. I've heard he's really impressed. So those would be the 4 right now, and they're the most. If you talk about most important position that needs to improve, besides the offensive line and as a whole, it'd be the linebacker room. It would be that linebacker room. We all know that. We don't need to go deep into it, but those guys need to perform for UCF to have the season that they want to have. Corners. Brandon Adams, he's an NFL corner. UCF is very lucky to have him. I think Mac McWilliams might pull out the second starting corner job. I think he transferred from UAB. Every time the coaches talk about him, they say he's so physical. You can tell that he's just got something else to him. He's got a dog-like mentality, and they all say that all the corners have a dog-like mentality, and we saw it last year. I think the corners were not the problem on the defense. One thing that you can take from the Addison Williams defense experience last year was they didn't give up big plays when it came to passing the football. They gave big plays in big chunks when running the football, but the defense was really good. The corners were really good. They do need to create more turnovers, and they've talked about that, about creating more turnovers, getting more interceptions. But I think right now, Brandon Adams and Mac McWilliams have the edges there. Free safety, strong safety. I know they might call it something different at UCF. I always say free safety, strong safety. Free safety, Brian Threats, another Cincinnati transfer. I think he is going to kind of get that starting nod. It's all about making plays. Quadric Bullard, you can easily also think will get the nod, but Brian Threats has made a lot of plays, I guess, in camp, and that would not shock me. I think Braden Marshall will get the nod of being able to play the star, and I think maybe Sheldon Arnold and Ladarius Tennyson will have to fight. I'm going to go with Sheldon Arnold right now. We just talked to him recently. Ladarius Tennyson has a role on this defense. And most of these guys that I'm mentioning, straight up, they're all going to play. With a defense that Coach Roof is running, you need to have depth because your one guys are going to not be playing. They might be playing 2 snaps and then have to, sub. And when you are playing high-tempo teams, you're going to need the depth that you have. So regardless of the 1s and 2s in this case, they all need to be ready because the 2s are going to get a lot of playing time. So that's it for defense right there. A lot of transfers. And then kicking, Colton Boomer's your kicker. But I will say, I was watching Grant Reddick kick the other day. We have another kicker. We do have another kicker. But Colton Boomer is your starter going in there. Gus said he changed up. He's coaching him like he was coaching him as a freshman. I think last year Gus was just fully confident in Colton and I guess coached him different. So he's going back to coaching him like he coached him as a freshman. So that's going to do it. Those are my predictions. I'm sure I'll get a couple wrong here or there, but the season's so close and we're hearing kind of all the same thing that it's almost foregone conclusion that 90% of what I just said is probably likely happening. So I just need these 2 weeks to go by fairly quickly. And luckily we've got a lot of, I'm very busy. We've got a lot that I'm planning for you guys, so we're really excited about that. But like I said, tune in next week. We've got technically 2 videos for you. We've got the episode on Friday for Charge On, and we've got our schedule release next week about what we're all planning to do. So check that out. That's going to be coming out on Wednesday. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. 13 days. 13 days cannot come soon enough. All right, everybody. This has been Charge On, presented by Bet Online. We will see you next week.